Scripture this morning comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 3 to 10. Happy are those who know they are spiritually poor. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Happy are those who mourn. God will comfort them. Happy are those who are humble. They will receive what God has promised. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires. God will satisfy them fully. Happy are those who are merciful to others. God will be merciful to them. Happy are the pure in heart. They will see God. Happy are those who work for peace. God will call them his children. Happy are those who are persecuted because they do what God requires. The kingdom of heaven belongs to them. Happy are you when people insult you and persecute you and tell you all kinds of evil lies against you because you are my followers. Be happy and glad, for a great reward is kept for you in heaven. This is how the prophets who lived before you were persecuted. This is the Good News version. Many of you will be familiar with "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." This is what we have been studying at Christ Church Cathedral Bible Study. Now share some reflections published by the Serendipity Bible Study. Poor in spirit. I recognize my spiritual bankruptcy and my need for God. Because my relationship with God depends on his grace, I know I'm incapable of earning God's love on my own. Mourn. I feel the pain that sin, including my own, causes. I can let others know when I'm hurting without embarrassment. I can weep like Jesus did. Meek. I don't have to be the strong one who is always in control. I can be tender and gentle. I've given control of my life to God. I don't always have to win. Spiritual hunger. I want to know God and his will for my life more than anything, including my own pleasure, status, or success. My heart truly longs for God. Merciful. I can share the feelings of people who are hurting, lonely, or distressed, and walk alongside them in their pain. God has given me a sensitivity for the suffering of others and a compassion to help them. Pure in heart. I'm completely honest with God and others. I don't have to put on a false front or pretend to be something I'm not. My life is marked with openness and integrity. Peacemaker. I work hard to keep channels of communication open with others. Rather than allowing anger and conflict to fester, I deal with them constructively. I help those around me work out their differences without hurting one another. Persecution. I know for whom and for what I am living. And for this, I am willing to suffer and, if need be, stand alone for what is right. I can take criticism without reacting defensively or feeling self-pity. It is my prayer that we will all recognize that we are poor in spirit and need the Lord, that we need to mourn for our own sins and that of our people as a nation. I pray that we will be meek, spiritually hungry, merciful, pure in heart, that we will be peacemakers even if it brings persecution. Let us pray. Good and gracious God, we ask for your blessing upon us as we prepare for the solemn season of Lent, starting next Wednesday on Ash Wednesday. As this midterm budget is debated, we pray for all members of this House, especially our Prime Minister and Cabinet, for the leader of the opposition and all other members of Parliament. May you all lead by godly example and wisdom, and may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Good morning, members. We continue with our debate of the Supplementary Appropriation Capital Development Account Expenses Bill.
2020. And with the midterm budget report. When we suspended last, the floor was reserved. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did reserve the spot for my neighbor in the Southwest Golden Isles, so I yield to Golden Isles.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm guided by Psalm 26:1. Judge me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity. I have trusted also in the Lord. Therefore, I shall not slide. Mr. Speaker, I'm thankful and grateful to Almighty God, Yahweh Elohim, for this wonderful gift of life and for touching the hearts and the minds of the people of the great constituency of Golden Isles to elect me to be their voice maximized. It is on their behalf that I stand. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, there's a video that apparently went viral on social media yesterday with some very young students, one male and two females. Thankfully, it was not a lengthy video, but amazingly bold and vulgar with sexual overtones. I'm satisfied, Mr. Speaker, that the institution dealt with and indeed dealing with it. Mr. Speaker, I was shocked by the video and shared it with many of my pastoral and ministerial colleagues who were just as shocked, troubled, and very concerned. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking parents if they would be more vigilant in the oversight of their children. I'm also asking pastors in general, especially the ones with schools in their areas, to please, if they haven't already done so, to adopt a school and become involved and try to assist with either establishing or reestablishing a culture based on morals and Christian values. I know some pastors are doing it already, but we need more or as many. And certainly, we can never have too many pastors involved. I would like again, Mr. Speaker, to make a clarion call for the need of a solemn assembly and a national day of repentance for our entire country, based on a familiar scripture, 2 Chronicles 7:13 and 14. It says, if I shut up heaven, that there be no rain, if I command the locusts to devour the land, or if I send pestilence among my people, it says, if my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. Our views in this chamber often differ, Mr. Speaker. But however, on this one, I assure you, we all unanimously agree that our land, our nation needs healing, needs it desperately. Mr. Speaker, also, as it relates to what we're even discussing now, is because of a disastrous hurricane. And so certainly as we are about to approach another hurricane season, we need prayers, we need divine intervention now more than ever. Mr. Speaker, I don't know if you've ever heard of this group, heard of them, call themselves OSB, Operation Sovereign Bahamas. They're a group of Bahamians who are concerned with developing a people's agenda, and they're raising particularly the issue of immigration. Some have said that they are too strident or too aggressive. Others have said that they are on the right path. Mr. Speaker, I would like to love for more of our citizenry and more groups like that to emerge. In respect of the immigration situation in our country, Mr. Speaker, this is a difficult and challenging issue. But it is an issue that undergirds all of our other issues, be they education, healthcare, social services, the environment, and others. I do not know enough to say specifically about this group. But I'm going, Mr. Speaker. I intend to meet with them. I intend to sit with them. And I intend to really get to know what they're about. Mr. Speaker, in our country, with regards to our immigration policies, I'm committed to some fundamental principles. One, that the Bahamas must have a clear, enforceable, and predictable immigration policy. And secondly, that our approach, as is, must continue to be humane and Christian-like, but firm, and must not demonize our Haitian brothers and sisters, nor confuse ourselves into thinking that they are the only migrants entering our country illegally. Truth be told, Mr. Speaker, there are others, and they pose an even greater economic threat. I myself, Mr. Speaker, will be looking to become more educated on this issue, to meet with this group, to discuss with them. And Mr. Speaker, I hope to come back to this House and to share with regards to those meetings. Mr. Speaker, there's much talk, particularly as we are in debate, with regards to the exploration of oil in our country. And so now there's much talk again about a sovereign wealth fund. There's much talk, Mr. Speaker, about who is going to get rich and who will not get rich and who can participate and who will not participate. Mr. Speaker, I know that with regards to a sovereign wealth fund, I wish to say this to Bahamians at large, from Grand Bahama to Inagua, from Bimini to Maguana. As the member from Parliament said, it is legislated, it is on the books. Certainly, Mr. Speaker, not active at all. I would like to say to our people, God is fair. Life is not so fair. And Mr. Speaker, you only get out of life what you fight for. And so if Bahamians think they can just sit, relax, and it will come and fall in their laps, it is obvious that's not going to happen. You have to fight for your rights. You have to fight to get what you want out of life. Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Dorian, aptly described by the Minister of Finance in his presentation as the second strongest storm ever to cross the Atlantic, was both destructive and instructive to the Bahamas, which lies in the heart of the hurricane zone. From the destructive perspective, Mr. Speaker, Dorian snuffed out the lives of many Bahamians and residents alike, men, women, and the children, as well as caused tremendous damage to property and infrastructure in Abaco and Grand Bahama particularly. From the instructive perspective, Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt in my mind that the government, having seen previously the utter devastation in Ragged Island caused by Hurricane Irma, still maintained the lackadaisical attitude toward hurricane preparedness that had prevailed for decades in our country, and was thus caught off guard and unable to do anything to assist people in saving their lives in Abaco and Grand Bahama. It is in this vein that I find this supplementary budget woefully deficient. My concern, Mr. Speaker, is that in all these presentations, discussions, deliberations, calculations, projections, there is nothing, no allocation whatsoever that deals with protecting human life in the face of the hard, cold fact that the 2020 hurricane season begins in a little over 3 months from now, on June 1st, 1 month before this supplementary budget expires on June 30th. Mr. Speaker, there is nothing in this budget that addresses this instructive aspect of Hurricane Dorian, which is hurricane preparedness. The government is doing much to repair after the hurricane, while failing dismally to prepare before hurricane. The government...
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael on a point of order.
Speaker, I know the honorable member is seeking to make his point. It would be helpful and I believe instructive for him to appreciate that in the Ministry of Public Works, there is a group that's specifically there for hurricane preparation. That group is led by one of our most senior engineers, and that group starts their preparation at the end of every hurricane season, and they work assiduously through the process of preparing for hurricanes. They involve a number of other groups, and they are also liaising with NEMA on a regular basis. And so I know the member seeks to make a point, but the reality is these are public servants, they're not politicians. And these public servants deserve respect for their hard work. They work very hard to try to protect us and prepare us for hurricanes. And so I hope that after having made that point, that the honorable member will withdraw that. If he wants to make some specific point about preparation, then he may wish to do that. But we do have dedicated, hard-working public servants working year-round to prepare for hurricanes. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on a point of order.
Yes, sir. I also want to address the point of preparation from a financial point of view. Mr. Speaker, we have layered our risk mitigation.
Honorable member, I'm not hearing you. Can you give him some volume?
I just wanted to make a point regarding the financial preparation.
Yeah.
We have layered our risk mitigation strategies across various instruments, from contingent credit lines to catastrophic risk insurance to our own disaster relief fund, which we had been building to address the personal side or the private sector side of hurricane risk. Unfortunately, of course, we would not have been able to build that to the level that we would like. But we are committed to it, and we are returning to that strategy, which has given us some level of resources to be able to deal with the immediate effects of storms. So I understand the point that is being made, but I think it's important, as the Minister for Works, the member for Carmichael would have said, that we make sure that we put this in context, because to say that there is no preparation would not be accurate.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville. And incidentally, honorable member for Golden Isles, your time is being protected here.
Thank you, thank you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. When the honorable member for Golden Isles spoke to preparation, the thing that came to me was the act and the requirement. The act has a requirement that a report is presented to this House. And so I just wanted to, Mr. Speaker, could you, am I? Okay.
Honorable member,
Yeah.
I understand what you're doing. I'm giving you leave to
Great, yeah. So I just
do so up to a certain point.
Great. So in terms of preparation, I just wanted to know when would this
Which act are you referring to?
the Disaster Recovery Act?
The disaster recovery.
Yeah, and so I just wanted to know when would this report, and I think the report is somewhat of an assessment. When would that be made before the House? Because I think it's a requirement of the act.
Thank you, honorable member. Golden Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as it relates to this supplementary budget, Mr. Speaker, the most essential of the essentials, the most imperative of the imperatives.
Honorable member for Golden Isles, the member for Carmichael and the member for East Grand Bahama took issue with the statement on a point of order. I just want to know if you would be prepared to reword it or to withdraw it.
What are they taking?
They took issue with the statement that nothing is being done in hurricane preparedness for the upcoming season.
Speaker, as it relates to it being in the budget, it's not in the budget.
The report has been presented, nothing.
It's not in the budget, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Carmichael on a point of order.
It is important for the member and everybody in this country to understand and appreciate that this budget, as the Minister of Finance has indicated, this interim budget, and the reason why we are going to be borrowing money is chiefly because of the ravages of Hurricane Dorian. And that's not an issue of preparation. That's an issue of what has happened to our communities. That is an issue, Mr. Speaker, of the challenges, what we see in Abaco when I go there. And we see the utter destruction. And when we go to East End Grand Bahama, how Bahamian people have suffered. And so in this money that we're borrowing is money for BPL so that they can generate power and restore power in those Abaco and the Keys. In this budget is money, millions and millions of dollars for the cleanup efforts in Grand Bahama and Abaco. In this budget, Mr. Speaker, every single ministry, including the Ministry of Agriculture, notwithstanding the fact that they have a small share, millions and millions of dollars, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to restore the infrastructure of this country. So, member, I know where you're trying to get, but it's important for me to be able to relate what we're really debating here, and the money that is in this budget for the Bahamian people and to restore our country. This budget is chiefly about restoring the country after Dorian.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honorable member. Now, Mr. Speaker, I am not a financial guru. The member from Centerville is, the member for East Grand Bahama, they are the gurus. I'm not. The member from Exuma, Ragged Island, they're the gurus. I'm not. But the little I do understand about budgets is when you prepare a budget, if it shouldn't reflect in the budget exactly what the preparation. Shouldn't it be in the budget, Mr. Speaker? I'm just referring to the budget. I'm specifically speaking as it relates to the budget.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for
Sure.
East Grand Bahama.
Again, as I mentioned, in the annual budget, there is a line in the Ministry of Finance that speaks to the disaster fund. Monies are actually allocated for that, $1 million a year. When you will also see in there the premiums for the catastrophic risk insurance fund, the CRIF. Mr. Speaker, the contingent credit line is not a budget item because it doesn't become a liability until you draw from it. So you wouldn't see it on the revenue side nor on the liability side because it doesn't become an actionable thing or asset or liability until such time as you draw it. So you wouldn't see that, but the provision is there. So when you speak about the preparation for the storm, these are just some of the instruments that we put in place and that are in fact budgeted. In addition to that, there is, the dormant accounts, which is another feature, and we knew, as you know, we would have passed a bill in respect to that, and designating those funds specifically for disaster response. But in addition to that, there's also contingencies in the budget that tries to take into account these unexpected events. Sometimes this particular hurricane in particular is of such a magnitude that all of the risk strategies we put in place was not significant, not sufficient. Hence, we're here today trying to get the Parliament to approve the additional borrowing that we need. So this is not a lack of planning. This is not a lack of being proactive. It's just a matter of the sheer magnitude of the loss, that it exceeds our contingencies.
Thank you. Honorable members, I am permitting this exchange because I believe it is instructive, particularly at this point in our debate and going forward, particularly with respect to the real likelihood that we can be faced with other disasters of a similar nature in the future. That's a reality. Thank you, Honorable Member, for Golden Isles. You may continue.
Mr. Speaker, it's precisely in light of what the member for East Grand Bahama stated in terms of the magnitude of Dorian. I will try to progress and navigate as best I can. But, Mr. Speaker, all of the borrowings and the transfers, the fiscal targets, the key issue of hurricane-proof shelters is a great concern to me, for the hundreds of thousands who would need them whenever the next hurricane strikes. Mr. Speaker, post-Dorian, persons would often say, boy, that would have been something if Dorian had hit Nassau.
Honorable Member for Golden Isles. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I'm not mistaken, just a moment ago, you asked the Honorable Member for Golden Isles if he would do one of two things. One, to restate what he said or secondly, to withdraw what he said. The honorable members for both East Grand Bahama and Carmichael spoke on 2 occasions, bringing clarity to the issue. And I do not recall, Mr. Speaker, to this point, and I didn't want to get up. I figured I'd give the honorable member some time. Perhaps he was getting to it, but I'm a bit concerned that he's moving along quite a bit. And he has not done what you've asked him, Mr. Speaker, which is one, to either restate what he said in terms of the broad brush statement he made, or conversely, he could withdraw the entire statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for
Mr. Speaker,
Golden Isles.
again, Mr. Speaker, which statement are they referring to? Just which statement?
Honorable Member, it was a statement that seemed to suggest that nothing is being done for, or had been done for preparation, hurricane preparedness, the preparation leading into the current season.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, I am no financial guru. In my humble opinion, Mr. Speaker, I'm just stating, based on what I've read in the supplementary budget, I don't see it. That's all I'm saying. Or certainly not enough. If that's all I'm saying. Now, is anything wrong with that?
Just a moment, Honorable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, I just again, member permit, just to help, and I honestly just want to help. The supplemental budget does not reflect the hurricane preparation strategy. The supplementary budget reflects the response of the government to the disaster that has happened. And as I indicated earlier, all of the strategies that had existed prior to the storm, which was in response to the normal level of storms that we have, was not adequate due to the magnitude of the loss. And so the supplemental budget is to address that deficit, that immediate need to affect and to help people in the affected areas, to try and bring some normalcy and some support to their condition. So the supplemental budget is not to reflect the planning for the budget, for the storms. It is to reflect the response of the government to the storm.
Thank you.
No, sorry, I shouldn't respond to it on the floor. But the budget itself reflected the strategies of the government to address the potential for storm. And as I said, we've exhausted those strategies, and we needed additional borrowing, which is what's reflected in the supplemental. Going into the new budget for 2020-2021, we will have additional strategies and additional tools that we will implement, reflecting this storm, as well as what we feel is the need, as best we can afford for the upcoming season. So again, it's not a matter of not preparing, or not putting in the required, or what we thought was adequate strategy. It's just a matter of the magnitude of the storm could not be predicted.
Thank you. Honorable members, I don't want us to continue to belabor this point. I think, from my perspective, it appears as if the member's issue was in the absolute statement, as opposed to a more of a statement indicating that, in your opinion, that this particular supplementary budget doesn't make allocations for the preparation for the upcoming season. I think it is concerned with the response in the aftermath of Hurricane Dorian. And so the chair is satisfied that we are in a position that we can continue.
Speaker, thank you. I'm often referred to as an extremist, Mr. Speaker, so maybe in light of that, I will seek to make the necessary adjustments. Mr. Speaker, there's not enough in this budget, in my opinion, to suggest that funds are to be expended to sufficiently save lives from potential perils of a Category 5 hurricane. This seemingly lackadaisical attitude of successive governments, mere weeks before hurricane threats begin, bring to mind the parable that Jesus gave relative to the 10 virgins. It behooves me that we seek to follow the example of the 5 wise virgins who prepared. It is common knowledge, Mr. Speaker, that structures that have been designed as hurricane shelters were no more than large covered spaces in which throngs of frightened people can be crammed. Most, Mr. Speaker, or many were not structurally sound to withstand the Category 5 winds, and many not at least 20 feet above sea level to avoid vicious storm surges. Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama again on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important that we do not allow the word lackadaisical to sit on the record unchallenged. And I, you know, again, Mr. Speaker, words have meaning, and we have young people in the audience today who may take the view that the government has been idle in respect to preparing or addressing the storms. Mr. Speaker, that is, you know, I think I've demonstrated already that is far from the truth. This is a matter that is taken up much of the attention of the world as we talk about climate change and climate crisis.
Specifically,
and Mr. Speaker,
specified.
this government has been no different. As I said, we have employed strategies to address storms.
On a border, Mr.
We have also, Mr. Speaker,
The explanation.
the member, please.
Honourable
Mr.
member
Speaker.
for Pine Ridge.
Yeah, you need to go to the seat.
Honourable member for Pine Ridge. Allow the chair to function. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, and the last point, in respect to storm shelters, I think the member would be, and certainly those of us from Grand Bahama, would be well aware of the shelters that are available to us during successive storms in the past. And this is the first time that we've had this magnitude of damage and compromise. Yes, we have had issues in the past, but to this level of compromise and for as many shelters have been affected, this is a first. And so the point that the member is making is valid, but I think he has to make that in the context of advocating for shelters to be built, not speaking about preparation, because until now, we had adequate shelters. So it's not a lackadaisical.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Carmichael on a point of order.
Brother and my neighbor on the west from Golden Isles started by speaking about the ferocity of Dorian. We all appreciate that. And so when he touches on this issue with respect to the adequacy or inadequacy of the shelters, it's important for all of us to remember that Dorian had sustained winds of 185 miles per hour, gusts of 200 miles over Grand Bahama, and the building code of the Bahamas only contemplated winds of 150 miles per hour.
150.
So as you develop it, and as the Minister of Finance has indicated, one of the issues to consider as we go ahead as a country, as a people who are working together, is looking at the revision of the building code that Minister Lewis spoke about, looking at these types of progressive issues. And so, Mr. Speaker, I as my neighbor, and as my colleague, and as someone I've spoken with many times, I'm not seeking to interrupt him, but I'm seeking to ensure that the appropriate information that we have is out there, because we have never seen, except for Ragged Island, that strength of wind that impacted this country. A superstorm like Dorian. And with climate change, we anticipate that we are going to have more of them. And you and I, all of us, want the best for this country. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member, I don't think he intended to mislead Parliament, and I want to make that clear. But I think there's an important fact, as the honourable member for Carmichael was just stating. Along with what he just said, there's a very important fact, Mr. Speaker. And you're a meteorologist, sir. What we did not expect, Mr. Speaker, and no one could have anticipated it, sir, as regards shelters, particularly in Grand Bahama. And the fact of the matter is there were shelters everywhere in New Providence and in Grand Bahama. But what we could not have expected, Mr. Speaker, and no one could have, was that the hurricane would have sat over Grand Bahama for 36 hours, sir. No one could have or did have. No one anticipated that. We didn't. No international agency did. No one, sir. No one anticipated that. And that was a torrential downpour, sir, for 36 hours. And I think, sir, that is a very important key here in terms of some of the challenges some of the shelters may have faced. But nobody could have expected it, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Honourable member for Golden Isles, so that we can proceed without interruption, I think it would do us all well if you preface any comment as instead of being absolute in it. If you say it is your opinion, I don't think anyone can have much problems with that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's what I was doing, but still. But Mr. Speaker, it's precisely why I'm saying what I'm saying based on in the aftermath of Dorian. We've never experienced an hurricane like Dorian. Never. And so in light of that, Mr. Speaker, I am saying that I expected more in this because we've never experienced it before. So since we've experienced it, and since they're saying because of climate change, we can experience more of this, Mr. Speaker, I don't care if Dorian was 2 hours over New Providence, it would devastate us. So I didn't have to hover over us for 2 days, like Grand Bahama. New Providence cannot take it. And there's nothing being done, and I don't know exactly what can be done. All I'm saying.
Honourable member, I think that is the difficulty right there.
No.
And you say there's nothing being done.
Permit me, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying, as far as I know, for what I can see, based on the supplementary budget, okay, in terms of the preparation to the extent that it needs to be done, to that extent, Mr. Speaker, I'm not saying it's not being done, but certainly I don't see it being done. And Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this so that whatever the necessary precautions we need to take, that we will do that. Mr. Speaker, there's no allocation for NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, headed by a director, just like the Department of Meteorology, the Department of Immigration, and others. NEMA is the only agency that has statutory authority to carry out hurricane preparedness activities. The duties and responsibilities of NEMA and its director are laid out clearly in the Disaster Preparedness and Response Act. But this supplementary budget totally ignores NEMA. Meteorology has a head in the budget. Immigration has a head in the budget. ZNS has a head in the budget. Clifton Heritage, the Sports Authority, BAMSI. They all get mentioned in the budget. The only legal authority with the responsibility for hurricane preparedness got nothing in the budget, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on a point of order.
At Golden Island, right.
Speaker,
You're right, Golden.
the member may not be aware, but the National Emergency Management Authority is actually in the office of the Prime Minister. And there's also allocation for the Disaster Relief Recovery Ministry in the budget. So to make the statement that there's no preparation or no allocation for NEMA and disaster recovery would be inaccurate.
Thank you.
You thought wrong.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden
Speaker.
Heights.
So, Mr. Speaker, so
Good, Golden Island. Good.
again, if that since that is so, Mr. Speaker,
So he said.
it is irregular. And I tell you why. Mr. Speaker. As other statutory agencies within the portfolio of these two offices, such as the printing department and BIS, they are mentioned separately in the budget. But NEMA wasn't. So, Mr. Speaker, since this supplementary budget was generated by a hurricane, I just expected that a part of the government's response to provide an estimate, an indication in the budget of the level of funding required by NEMA to carry out its hurricane preparedness initiatives. This is a part of the instructive side
You got to ask what his name of job.
of Dorian.
What they were doing now.
Then, Mr. Speaker, also, there is the other agency, the novel Ministry of Disaster Preparedness, Management, and Reconstruction, headed by a Minister of State in the office of the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what funding in the budget is allocated to that ministry? In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, it was necessary. Well, let me move on. I'm attempting to navigate this, Mr. Speaker. In my extremist approach, I'm trying to navigate it and curtail it and make it more palatable for my colleagues. Mr. Speaker, granted, the finance minister states that $1.5 million for recurrent expenditure, $2.5 million for capital expenditure was allocated to this ministry. There is no listing of this in the budget book. And the no breakdown, Mr. Speaker, as for other ministries. In my opinion, Mr. Speaker, it's highly irregular, improper, and undesirable. Mr. Speaker, in my opinion, it's cold, may be considered callous. It is Mr. Speaker,
What the public said. Why you don't table the NEMA annual report? No, we should have it now.
Mr. Speaker,
Prepare this plan. Where's that?
in 2020, months after the instructive visit of Dorian,
I'm just telling you that. Reporters are telling you.
we now know, Mr. Speaker, that old buildings, old schoolhouses, and other buildings with leaky roofs, weak walls, rattling unsecured windows will not do for hurricane-proof shelters. And any building, Mr. Speaker, on low ground below 20 feet will be vulnerable to storm surges. Mr. Speaker, we have all seen photographs of persons in Abaco and Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, that they were pinned beneath roofs, the rafters. Mr. Speaker, we have heard the harrowing accounts of blown out windows, falling roofs, collapsing walls of some of the so-called hurricane shelters. As we move forward, the instructive message from Dorian has to be preparation or possibly death. In 2020, Mr. Speaker, after Dorian, we now know that to simply find space to hold a large number of people will not satisfy the rigorous criteria for hurricane-proof shelters certified by qualified engineers. In his presentation in the supplementary budget, the minister stated, Hurricane Dorian significantly changed the course of our lives. The thinking, Mr. Speaker, of successive governments, obviously, up to Dorian, has to change drastically, must change. And based on what I'm hearing, so all I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is in this budget, and I've heard what the Minister of Finance, the member for East Grand Bahama, said, so I'm moving forward with that in mind. But Mr. Speaker, on behalf of Bahamians at large, after such devastating effects of Dorian that is still lingering, and particularly for those of us who reside on the island of New Providence, that as we are about 3 months out from the hurricane season, which begins June 1, and it goes until November, the last day of November, that, Mr. Speaker, another hurricane like Dorian, and we've been told we can expect more of them in light of the climate changes. Personally, Mr. Speaker, I would like for us to be far more proactive. Because as I said earlier, I think successive administrations, and as adequately stated, none The first hurricane of that magnitude was Dorian. And in light of Dorian, in the aftermath of Dorian, as a people, we've always been accused of waiting for last minute. As a people, we've always been accused of sometimes not even preparing. And I would like for the government to take that initiative to see if we can shift the mindset, the culture of our people as we approach storms, as we approach hurricanes. Because to date, we cannot give an accurate number of the amount of deaths. It has never happened in our country before. And so I expected more in the budget with regards to preparedness. I expected, I anticipated, I wanted to see more in the budget with regards to hurricane preparedness, because I feel, I believe, particularly on the island of New Providence, where we've hardly been hit or visited by hurricanes. Mr. Speaker, if a hurricane, anything like the magnitude of a Dorian, was to visit us in New Providence, there would be bedlam in the city. And so all I'm saying, all I'd like to see, all I expected to see was that reflected in this budget. And so I shall wait. And I shall be very observant and see what happens when it's time for the annual budget debate and see what is in that budget. And so, Mr. Speaker, I go back to what I stated earlier with regards to the proposal to search for oil in our country. I am concerned, Mr. Speaker, with our Sovereign Wealth Fund bill that was established in 2014, where it specifically states the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund would allow the government to invest surplus funds derived from natural resources for the benefit of the citizens of the Bahamas. The prudent use of wealth generated from our natural resources has the potential to provide the basis for sustainable economic growth and development. Some of the benefits of establishing a sovereign wealth fund includes the stabilization of revenue and safeguarding of revenues for future generations by the creation of a separate vehicle by which the government can account for revenue receipts and utilization. Further, Mr. Speaker, I again speak of the organization EITI, Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. And I again would like to suggest that we become a part of this organization, our country. They believe that a country's natural resources, such as oil and gas and metals, belongs to its citizens. Mr. Speaker, this organization was established in response to the recognition that many countries rich in natural resources were home to some of the poorest people on earth. And research by the World Bank and others concluded that the cause of that phenomenon was mismanagement and corruption. The solution, it was decided, was to bring transparency and accountability to the process of exploiting natural resources, and thus the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative was launched in 2003 by the then UK Prime Minister, Tony Blair. And Mr. Speaker, as read in the newspapers, as being circulated over social media, that the planned date to begin, didn't give an exact date, but the month to begin the drilling is in April. That's in less than 2 months. And my concern, Mr. Speaker, is that Bahamians, particularly the average, ordinary Bahamian, is not left out of this. And so please, the Sovereign Wealth Fund bill, it's on the book. Please, Mr. Speaker, please, I beg this House, let's move forward with it, and let's move forward and take along the marginalized, the locked out, the left out with us. And this can benefit them tremendously. Mr. Speaker, I thank you. May Almighty God, Yahweh Elohim, continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas and to make the wealth more common. Long live the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Members, just before we proceed, we have a distinguished group in the gallery with us today. It is the grade 12 students from Mount Carmel Preparatory Academy. Can you stand for us? They are accompanied by a former senator and teacher, Mr. Trevor Wiley, who is a teacher for social studies and civics, and Miss Thomas, the English teacher. Thank you very much for joining us today. I think this is a good day for you to be here with us because a lot of issues arose out of the presentation by the member for Golden Isles that I think we all can benefit from in terms of the explanations and the response given in this debate. It was very instructive. Thank you once again for coming. You may have your seat. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pine Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On a point of a point of order.
Yes,
or?
as you said, Mr. Speaker, emanating out of the presentation, I just wanted to lay on the record so that the government would be aware that because of this presentation and what you just said to the students, I thought it's appropriate to just ask the government to please, if they would lay on the table the NEMA report, preparedness report for 2019, that should be signed off by the Prime Minister. We'd like to have that report because I think that report is very important for us to have, the NEMA preparedness report for 2019.
Thank you, honorable
That is
member.
signed off
Many?
by the Prime Minister.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this member stands in support of the 2019-2020 or as it is called, the Hurricane Dorian budget. Mr. Speaker, I want to give thanks to Almighty God, who has given me life and good health, to speak on behalf of the great people of the Michael constituency. They have elected me on May 10, 2017, to be their voice, and I am grateful. Mr. Speaker, the people of Michael know that when I stand here, yes, I may fumble over a few things, but they know and have confidence in me that I will get it right. Mr. Speaker, my commitment to them is that I will never compromise the things that matter most in politics, which are good character, honesty, integrity, and who you are when no one is looking. Justice for all, love for them, and the people of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, Michael constituency is still in need of further assistance from this caring government. Like I often say, we're not asking for much. Mr. Speaker, let me say special thanks to the honorable member for Southern Shores, Minister of Social Services and Urban Development, and the honorable member for Garden Hills, Minister of Public Service and National Insurance, along with officials from their various ministries and departments. They and I visited Acklands and Cricket Island and Long Key on January 29th to February 1st. Town meetings were held in Acklands and Cricket Island. Mr. Speaker, the residents came out in great numbers, and they were excited about the government's plans for their various communities. Mr. Speaker, yes, there are some issues, but we are making great progress. The residents of Acklands and Cricket Island for the first time can receive passports, birth certificates, and other documents without having to travel to New Providence. Mr. Speaker, as I stated, we have some challenges, but the various government ministries and departments are aware and dealing with them. I will speak of some at a later date. Mr. Speaker, the people in Inagua are still crying for their school. I have convinced them that it is on the way. And now turn to Education Loan and Authority. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Most Honorable Prime Minister and Member of Parliament for Kalani for appointing me as chairperson of the Education Loan Authority. In addition, I want to thank the honorable member for South Beach, with whom I have a good working relationship. Also the staff of Education Loan and Authority, many of whom make my job challenging, but exciting. Mr. Speaker, I am not going to say much about the Education Loan Authority. However, since we have made additional appeals and published names in the daily newspapers, many persons came and paid their outstanding loans. Others have made financial agreements. Mr. Speaker, we want to thank them and are appealing to other persons who have not yet contacted us to please do so at their earliest convenience. Mr. Speaker, our compliance officers continue to utilize every avenue, including social media, to locate loan holders, some of whom reside in other countries. Mr. Speaker, I now turn my attention to the Supplementary Appropriation and Borrowing Resolution 2019-2020, the Hurricane Dorian budget. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, none of us want to borrow money or have loans. The good book says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. I am sure none of us want our future generation to become slaves. However, Mr. Speaker, There are some projects, things that requires urgent attention, and a decision must be made now. And at this time, it may be the right thing in borrowing to assist, in borrowing money to assist the persons of Grand Bahama and Abaco. Mr. Speaker, I am convinced that Hurricane Dorian was a generation disaster and devastated Abaco and Grand Bahama, leaving $3.4 billion in damages, losses, and additional costs. Mr. Speaker, the people of the island need urgent financial assistance, and this government must take the lead. If not, for years to come, we will hear the chorus: foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but many people in Abaco and Grand Bahama have nowhere to sleep. Mr. Speaker, for those who feel that the government should not borrow at this time, what are they prepared to do? And what is their immediate solution? Are they willing to engage in what is called the Nehemiah's 10% solution for community and building after disaster? Mr. Speaker, during Jerusalem's disaster, there were abandoned homes and buildings. Few, if any, businesses and infrastructures that lie in ruins. They give 10% human capital for every community. Yes, 1/10 of the people moved into the city. The surrounding district tied people for the purpose of community building. Mr. Speaker, what financial contributions are we willing to give if we feel the government should not borrow the money? Mr. Speaker, the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama need our help, and they need it now. As I mentioned, who among us are willing to make a donation towards $587 million, which the government is seeking to borrow, of which $80 million is to refinance existing debt? Mr. Speaker, social media has made political brownie points very hard to come by these days. The people making an assessment of everything you say, whether it's true or false. Mr. Speaker, there are some who feel that the government should not borrow for the development and rebuilding of Abaco and Grand Bahama. But the economy of Abaco and Grand Bahama are too important to sit back and wait for donations from civic society and the international community. Mr. Speaker, as I stated, Nehemiah's idea was to have 10% of its people who are not affected to put their children in neighborhood schools, rebuild abandoned or neglect homes, shop at neighborhood stores and restaurants, establish businesses in the community, participate in local political affairs, and build up churches in the inner cities. Mr. Speaker, for those who are willing to help, the revitalization of our affected islands must come up with a spirit of not knowing it all, but instead a sense of mission. Mr. Speaker, for many years, I have hosted a conference, Women with Issues. This year's conference theme is the woman, her dignity, her rights, and her needs. Mr. Speaker, this loan which the governments Mr. Speaker, this loan which the government seek to borrow would assist in the restoring and the dignity, the right to belong, and assist in social and financial needs of the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, the building and restoration will take time, but it must start from somewhere. This minutes-led government and all of us, the people have elected us, must ask, what can I do and where do we begin? I say supporting this document is the right thing to do. It would bring about new life for the people of Abaco, Grand Bahama, and the Bahamas at large, because all of us know or know families who are affected by Hurricane Dorian. We must wash our minds from which political party represents the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama. They, like us, are Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, this minutes-led government cannot allow lingering resentment to boil over. Abaco and Grand Bahama are the number 2 and 3 economies. They need help, and they need it now. The loan is the right way to go at this time. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Kalani can be seen as the unexpected prime minister and represent change from the outside with the people's time agenda. He must lead in the building and the restoration of Abaco and Grand Bahama, that the lives of Bahamians everywhere may be touched. Mr. Speaker, people are in need, and communities which are neglected often feel resentment against those who have left them behind, those who oppress them, and those who are supposed to protect them but don't. Mr. Speaker, I have learned in politics that resentment can boil over. Those who oppose you can create plans and make promises, even if they have no idea how it would happen, yet people tend to listen and buy into it. Mr. Speaker, the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama, they are Bahamians at large and would build by working with adversaries and well as advocates. This country must and will be built by FNMs, PLPs, independents, and DNAs. Only then would we affect change or would actually be the beneficial to the people of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I call on all of us to forget about political brownie points. Amen. The color red, gold rush. Think about, we believe in Bahamians, and it's the people's time. And let us support this budget for the rebuilding the lives of the people, Grand Bahama, Abaco, and the Bahamas at large. Mr. Speaker, God bless you. And God bless my fellow honorable members. Again, I call upon all of us to do the right thing for the people of this country. Long live the Bahamas. After many of us are no longer in this place. Mr. Speaker, Michael supports this supplementary appropriation and borrowing resolution 2019-2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My pleasure and privilege to stand here in this hallowed place for and on behalf of the good people of Southern Shores who have reposed their confidence in me. And I want to reassure them every time I stand here that I recommit myself to the ideals that I would have espoused when I visited with them and with the partnerships that I continue to nurture with them. Mr. Speaker, if you would allow me, I would want to join with a group of young men from Southern Shores who I would have had a number of conversations with, and I'm in the process of assisting in their pursuit of a business venture, and who I know are saddened today because they would have lost a good friend, Marco Polo. And so I want to say to the group, Shinari and the rest of them, to be strong. The Lord does all things well, and he could be further honored if they would continue to pursue the goals and ideals that he would have shared with them. Mr. Speaker, there have been in recent times a spike of unfavorable activity in the Southern Shores constituency. And I'm pleased to say that the work that I've been doing with the neighborhood watch groups in that area has intensified, because I'm of the firm belief that if we build the necessary community spirit in Southern Shores to the extent that neighbors are sufficiently familiar and friendly with each other, we're able to quickly identify outsiders who are likely to come in and wreak havoc. And so I want to thank the leaders and members of all of the neighborhood watch groups that are working, and reassure them that my continued support is guaranteed. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to join you in welcoming the group of students from Mount Carmel. I want to say to them that they may often hear that they are the future. I want them to know that that future is now. I want them to know that notwithstanding all of the unpredictability that we are faced with from time to time, that they have the opportunity to predict their future if they are prepared to work towards and make it. And so students, you can sit here today and predict that you're going to be a doctor if you're prepared to put in the work that is required to become a doctor. You can predict that you're going to be whatever you want to be, as long as you're prepared to make that future. I advise you to take advantage of all the opportunities that are being afforded. and to make sure that you have no excuse at the end of the day. I wish you well, and as you sit here and listen, I will leave you with this one word of encouragement that was given to me when I was probably your age. An elderly lady by the name of Gloria Cartwright told me once that you could pick sense out of nonsense. So listen, and you determine what is sense at the end of the day. Mr. Speaker, I'm privileged to lead the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. Social services has been, even before the storm, that arm of the government that people rely on when they fall short of some resources. That arm of the government that people rely on when things are not going as they would want it. That arm of the government that people rely on when the cupboards are bare. Hurricane Dorian exacerbated those demands and those requests. But Hurricane Dorian did not for a minute set aside or allow us the privilege to not continue to focus on our regular, everyday clients. And so, at the beginning of the budget or during the last budget debate, while I had the privilege of boasting of increases in certain areas, for example, I was able to boast about the increase in uniform allowance. Hurricane Dorian created a demand on that very same fund that would have been threefold to what we would have budgeted. And so I have no choice, Mr. Speaker, but to stand here and support this borrowing resolution, because I can't, in good conscience, say to those students who would have been affected that they would have to wait until July or sometime in the future before they could be given the uniform assistance necessary for them to go back to school and seek some form of normalcy. Mr. Speaker, food assistance, the requests for appliances, furniture, the requests for medical assistance as a result of the trauma persons would have faced. Can't wait, as the good member for Michael would have told us just a while ago. And so in that regard, Mr. Speaker, I support this resolution. I'm satisfied, Mr. Speaker, that no matter what the presentation is, no matter what the projection is, no matter what the plans of this government are, there are persons who will have some reservation. There are persons who will have some dissatisfaction. There are persons who will just outright oppose. And that is their right, Mr. Speaker. But I also want everyone to appreciate that it is also the right of others to support if that is what they believe. It is the right of others to speak in support of if that is their conviction. As legislators, we are here to ensure that all persons have the rights that are in the Constitution and that all persons respect the rights of others. And so we have a duty when we stand in this place to say, this is what we believe, this is what we think, but not to the point where we try to suggest that nobody else has the right to believe or think something different, or to suggest, as I would have heard, that to think different or to support something makes one less. I don't want to use any word that is derogatory, but makes one less than a man, less than an individual, or that one may be singing for his or her supper. We are about respecting each other's rights, even when we disagree with them. Respectfully, we ought to do so. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would have heard of the lack of preparation, no preparation, or not enough preparation, particularly as it relates to Hurricane Dorian. Mr. Speaker, I want to go on record as refuting those assertions from the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. Persons would recall prior to the hurricane season and all throughout, there would have been public service announcements indicating where the shelters are in your area, where you need to go, what you need to take with you, et cetera, et cetera. Those things didn't happen by accident, Mr. Speaker. Those announcements came about as a result of a group of dedicated civil servants, including members from the Disaster Preparedness Unit of our ministry, who would have gone and visited and inspected buildings, and based on the norm, would have certified that certain buildings are acceptable to be used as shelters. We didn't anticipate a Dorian, Mr. Speaker. But what is strange and ironic, even in our preparations as Dorian was approaching, in our final preparations, we reviewed our list of buildings to be used as shelters. And there were differing views from professionals. We had a group of engineers who said building A could not be used for a shelter because it's not ready, it's not safe. Well, Carmel, I want to report to you that the very building that those engineers said couldn't be used is the very building that some persons had to resort to after a building that was certified to be used had to be abandoned because the roof came off. It speaks to our inability to predict certain things as it relates to Mother Nature. And so, we have to accept that there is more that could be done. There's always more that could be done, Mr. Speaker. We occupy the largest room in the world, which is the room for improvement. But let us not take away from what has been done, because there is more that could be done. Mr. Speaker, I've committed that I will not be a part of a ministry that is New Providence centric. And so, as Michael would have indicated, we've taken to the road to visit with our practitioners throughout the Family Islands. And we were happy to be in Michael just recently. And we want to assure our practitioners in all of the other islands that we are en route and we will be there. But Mr. Speaker, my level of respect and gratitude for and towards the staff and the team of the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development has increased tenfold after observing and witnessing their level of commitment and dedication, even in the face of their own adversity, even while some of them lost their own homes and had family members who were injured and had family members who they were still searching for. They continued to give the service that was required. We manned up to 15 shelters throughout the Bahamas, 10 here in New Providence, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank those institutions that allowed us to use their facilities here in New Providence, in particular, All Saints Anglican Church, the Salvation Army, Enoch Backfoot Memorial Auditorium, Bahamas Academy Gymnasium, Pilgrim Baptist Church, the Sir Kendall Isaacs Gymnasium, Calvary Haitian Baptist Church, Grantstown Seventh-day Adventist Church, and of course, the Fox Hill Community Center. We were very fortunate to have use of these facilities, Mr. Speaker. And let me say that none of these facilities were purposely built for the amount of persons and the duration that we needed use of them. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to report that of all the shelters mentioned today, we have just one shelter still in operation, and that is the Bahamas Academy Gymnasium. We were able, on the 15th of this month, to free the Kendall Isaacs Gymnasium. And in another place, I express profound and sincere gratitude to the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture and her team who facilitated us, Mr. Speaker, and did everything they could to make those persons as comfortable as could be under the circumstances. I'm also pleased, Mr. Speaker, with the assistance from the Ministry of Health, who set up clinics in each of those shelters and had nurses on duty around the clock and had doctors visiting every day, while some persons attempted to be mischievous through social media to suggest that there was an epidemic here or an epidemic there. Those group of professionals, Mr. Speaker, ensured that it was not so. So to the member for Elizabeth and the Minister of Health, please convey our gratitude to your staff. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Education partnered with us to ensure that we were able to observe the laws of this land, that all children of school age will be in school. And they assisted us with assessments, and they assisted with necessary documentation, and where there was the absence of documentation, we did what was necessary, and all of the children were in school. And so I want to express my gratitude also to the Ministry of Education and the team there. Mr. Speaker, we had assistance from non-governmental organizations. Persons poured in to give assistance. And even from outside of the country, international organizations. And I understand and appreciate, particularly in the beginning, that there was some level of frustration because persons who were presenting themselves to assist found themselves being interviewed, found themselves being asked some questions. But you know, Mrs. Speaker, we have a duty, even in the face of a disaster, to ensure that persons who are offering assistance are both able to and sincere with the assistance that they are offering. Because, Mr. Speaker, we've heard stories where in the midst of these incidents, two groups of persons come forward, missionaries and mercenaries. We have a duty to receive the missionaries and protect our people from the mercenaries. And so, Mr. Speaker, I express gratitude to the international community. I assure the Bahamian people that we in the Ministry of Social Services are evaluating our protocols, policies, and procedures. We are mindful that it can't be business as usual. We are mindful that what we face could become more frequent. And we will continue, like every good sailor does, to adjust our sails and keep turning the steering wheel so that we could remain on course and meet our targets. We ask persons to continue to come and volunteer because the next hurricane season is upon us. We ask persons to appreciate that even as we haven't been able to conduct a complete postmortem of Dory because we're still living it, we are in fact planning for the commencement of the next season. Mr. Speaker, our ministry also includes the urban renewal, and that group is doing a tremendous job. They are looking after our elder, more experienced persons, providing opportunities for them to continue to be positively engaged and continue to contribute while they assure our elder, more experienced persons of our love and appreciation for them. Their most recent function would have been the Valentine's Day function at the Galleria, where more than 200 persons were taken to the movies. And Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you a secret. Don't mind them with them walking stick, As soon as that urban renewal ban lick up, walking stick to the side and they will wear you out. Mr. Speaker, there are 10 urban renewal centers here in New Providence, 25 in total throughout the Bahamas, and all of their functions are geared towards positively engaging both the elderly, more experienced persons and our young persons, and ensuring that there is some bridge between the two generations to secure the sharing that is necessary for the continuation of the perpetuation of our Bahamian culture. And so I thank the team at the Urban Renewal. I want to say special commendation to the Urban Renewal Band, who recently participated in the Martin Luther King parade. And while they were there, they were sufficiently impressive that I'm advised several of our young musicians returned home with offers of scholarship. Mr. Speaker, we continue to do our part to ensure that there is access and inclusion for the members of our community of persons with disabilities. We want to heighten the awareness of the need to ensure that there's no discrimination towards them. We want to encourage the kind of lifestyle that is promoted by the Ministry of Health, where it is possible for us to prevent or avoid certain habits or lifestyles that may result in disabilities later on. We want to ensure, particularly as it relates to our persons that are deaf and hearing impaired, that the wider community knows that they are among the driving public, especially law enforcement, Mr. Speaker, that there is an appreciation that they may not necessarily hear the sirens. And we are working with the commission to come up with decals or some form of identification to ensure that they are readily identified, not for any special treatment, but to ensure that there is an appreciation that they communicate with their hands and that persons will not feel threatened when they start to do that. Mr. Speaker, there is so much that I could and should say, but I want to just ensure that we appreciate, or I appreciate, that amidst all of the chatter, amidst all of the criticism, and some I accept as positive and constructive criticism, I'm pleased to note that there hasn't been any mention of persons being treated differently because of what is perceived to be their color of choice, or persons being treated differently because of their ethnicity or their religion, etc., etc. We have and continue to endeavor in the Ministry of Social Services, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that where a humanitarian need is identified, we will do our utmost to meet that need. And so for some persons who are still waiting on requests that they would have made through our various centers, I want to say to you that we are addressing, we are mobilizing the necessary funds, we are removing bureaucracy that may be impeding some of the progress. We are getting the response from the Ministry of Finance. And so I ask for a little more patience. I ask also for prayers and words of encouragement to the service providers, that God will continue to touch their hearts and they would be guided by the words in Psalms 82, that they would consider their treatment of the poor. Mr. Speaker, Southern Shores supports this resolution.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Sandoval. On a point of order?
Yes, on a point of order, I just wanted the member to complete his presentation. Earlier, Mr. Speaker, I would have spoken, I think I mentioned the Disaster Recovery Act, and I just wanted to clarify that it is the Disaster Preparedness and Recovery Act of 2006 that I was referring to. But I listened to the member, and, you know, from Mr. Speaker, I heard him mention the social assistance and the humanitarian assistance, and he spoke about refuting assertions of lack of preparation. I think it's important, especially that we have young people here today, for them to realize that we've had an act since 2006. And I think members need to recognize that we have not been following our own statutory obligation when it comes down to disaster preparedness.
Honorable Member, Honorable Member.
Go on.
I trust that you're finished because that point is not well taken as a point of order. But I permitted you to make the correction with respect to the act that was identified.
Right, it was clarification.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Thank you.
As many? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Central and South Abaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is through the grace of God and the strength and the resilience of the people of Abaco that I'm able to stand here today on their behalf. Mr. Speaker, these past few months have without a doubt been the most difficult, challenging, and heartbreaking human experience in the history of Abaco. It has not been easy, Mr. Speaker, but yet we carry on. Mr. Speaker, this Friday past, myself along with the Prime Minister, the member for Freetown, and the member for North Abaco were in Sandy Point, where we announced a heads of agreement for a multi-million-dollar project in the South Abaco area that would bring not only a large surge of initial jobs, but also career opportunities. They have partnered with BNT, the Bahamas National Trust, for the completion and to input the infrastructure into the Abaco National Park, which will turn it into a burgeoning area of ecotourism. Further to that, there's going to be the expansion of the Sandy Port airstrip to accommodate larger aircraft and to serve as an FBO to further stimulate the economy in the southern region of Abaco. The Hole in the Wall Lighthouse, which is a very important historical and architectural treasure. They're partnering with the government and the Bahamas National Trust to refurbish and maintain that ground while making it more accessible for both visitors, tourists, and of course our own Bahamian people, so we can treasure our own landmarks and our own history to experience that. Mr. Speaker, there's also going to be the implementation of a multi-million-dollar entrepreneur fund, which will allow Abaco entrepreneurs to access these funds to pursue their own dreams, their own businesses, their own career paths, and to have access and means and uses through those funds, Mr. Speaker. I speak about that, Mr. Speaker. We had a press conference in Abaco, and I'm very excited about it. And I bring that up as an overall point, Mr. Speaker, because I think it signals something very important, which is that the confidence and the faith in Abaco and its people has not wavered since Dorian. Mr. Speaker, we still love our island. And of course, all of our guests and tourists love our island too. So I was very happy to see that that confidence is still there. That belief is still there. That work ethic is still there. That is so uniquely Abaconian, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll also say, as a self-admitted environmentalist and conservationist, whenever we have these sorts of developments, we have to take a very cautious approach when we develop, so as to preserve the environment that makes our island so special in the first place. So that the fact that they are working with the National Trust to expand the national park and to further preserve these areas and make them more beneficial and useful for our own people, Mr. Speaker, is something I'm also particularly excited about. In addition to, of course, all the careers, jobs, and what we'll call the peripheral economy that will spurn out because of this. Mr. Speaker, I also want to remind my constituents, because I was thinking about this the other day. Pre-Dorian, two very important capital projects that Abaco desperately needed for years and years and years was something we were finally able to achieve. And I have to give specific thanks to the member for Carmichael in his capacity as Minister of Works for working with me through some numerous ups and downs and some challenges. But we were able to get signed contracts for the repaving of the Ernestine Highway on Abaco itself and the rehabilitation of a very, I'll call it critically dangerous area on the island of Hopetown, the Dune Road Rehabilitation Project. These are two cornerstone projects that I had spoke about even before I entered active political life. And to have those finally accomplished was something I'm very happy of, I'm very happy for. But I bring that up, Mr. Speaker, to remind my constituents that that has not fallen by the wayside. Those projects are still active and ongoing. I'm certain some persons would have been seeing the scarification and the heavy equipment on the Ernestine Highway itself. But I just want to reassure all of my constituents that that will not fall by the wayside. Those were important before Dorian, and they're even more important now. So those are still ongoing, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, there are a lot of people who get up and work very hard every day since the storm to restore Abaco, not only to its former glory, but make it a bigger, better place to live. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, Mr. Speaker. There are so many people who wake up every day, and from sunrise to sunset, that's what they do. They're rebuilding our homes. And that is no means limited to government employees and contractors, who are, of course, also very important and deserve to be recognized. But just the sheer amount of non-government organizations, charity groups, individuals, the people who have poured their heart and soul to assist us, Mr. Speaker, in doing these jobs day in and day out. It's really inspiring to see. And when you speak with some of these people, Mr. Speaker, especially those who have traveled to Abaco from faraway lands. I met a young woman from Germany who was there assisting. This is not just several people from Florida. We have caught the world's eye in a big way. And it's important that we acknowledge them and that we thank them and that they know how much it means to us, Mr. Speaker. And although there always may be disagreements, that's something I know I can speak fondly and safely for 100% of Abaconians when I say thank you to those people. So, Mr. Speaker, I say those things not trying to sugarcoat anything, and I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture of a scenario that's not there. The truth is, things are still very difficult. Nobody will deny that. I will not deny that. I know there's still great challenges in housing, utilities, infrastructure. There are a lot of challenges, and Mr. Speaker, the very unfortunate but necessary truth we need to embrace is that we're going to continue having some challenges, but that challenges are not insurmountable. Challenges are meant to be overcome, as long as you have the capacity and the willingness to do that. And the people of Abaco and the people of the Bahamas have that willingness and have that capacity, Mr. Speaker. So I would never try to downplay the daily struggles that so many of us are still going through. But there is light at the end of the dark path. And there are those out there who are going to continue to work with us and support us. And we have to work with them and support them. In short, Mr. Speaker, to be kind and gentle with one another. We're all going through the same experience. And tearing down your fellow man or woman will not rebuild your home. It will not restore your business. But it does have the capacity to hurt someone who's already suffered. So, Mr. Speaker, before turning to the budget itself, I would strongly urge, although it's been all over social media, but I would strongly urge any of my constituents in Abaco who have not yet done so, who are seeking to access the small home repairs program or to apply for funding from the Small Business Development Center. Those are resources that are available to you, and they are yours for the accessing. You are entitled to those things, granted you meet the criteria. So I'm encouraging all of you to please either visit the website or visit the office in person at the Abaco Government Complex in Marsh Harbor to find out if you're qualified, to read up on all the information, to please take advantage of these programs that the government is putting on to assist you. These can go a very long way in restoring a sense of normalcy to your life. So I strongly, strongly encourage anyone who's in need of assistance to take advantage of those programs. Mr. Speaker, there is one other thing before the budget itself. Speaker, I'm a very adamant supporter of free speech. And I believe there is a genuine difference between criticism, opinion, legitimate protest, which are all hallmarks of a democracy. But there is also a different scenario when you have the willful and malicious spreading and falsification of facts, or in some case, outright fabrications altogether, Mr. Speaker. And it's heinous, and I don't say that as an individual, Mr. Speaker, and I don't say it on behalf of the administration. I say it on behalf of the people of Abaco. I say it on their behalf because they have suffered too greatly and lost too much to have their emotions and their mentalities toyed with and played with through sick and unnecessary, I don't even want to call it a game, Mr. Speaker, because it is very serious, but that's what some people I think are getting at, Mr. Speaker. So I'd strongly encourage those persons that the people of Abaco are not yours to torment or toy with. They have suffered too much. and they should be allowed to continue and restore their lives in peace without having to be terrorized and confused by false information consistently being put out through social media. So, Mr. Speaker, for the budget itself, we know we're at the midterm, the supplemental budget. Of course, other members would have debated quite at length about this already, Mr. Speaker, but even from a zoomed out lens, the macroeconomic level, if we can call it that, we know that Abaco and Grand Bahama were and still are very important parts of the overall Bahamian economy. So when Dorian came and knocked the vast majority of that island's, both islands, including Abaco's, economic viability and capability, it directly hampered and damaged the overall economy of the Bahamas. So you immediately have lost two large chunks of consistent revenue. But now, Mr. Speaker, look at where we are today. There are things as an administration you have to do. You have to rebuild infrastructure. You have to rebuild schools. You have to reestablish clinics. You have to make all these public amenities available and usable again. So you have to spend, Mr. Speaker. You have to spend a lot of money. And of course, the government also made the decision to offer a number of concessions on taxes in those areas. So you've lost the regular revenue source. There's no taxes, or very minimal taxes, I guess I'll put it that way, to spur economic growth. And we're having to spend a large amount of money to make the islands economically viable and self-sustaining again. And that is no small task, Mr. Speaker. I know that's in crude, simple terms, but when it boils down to it, Mr. Speaker, that's what it really is. We've lost major sources of revenue. We're having to sink a lot of money into those areas because they deserve it, they're entitled to it. We're all our brothers and sisters. And if it were to happen in New Providence or Eleuthera or anywhere else, I don't think we should expect any different. We all need to be there for each other. So this extra spending in Freeport and of course in Abaco is not only necessary, it's imperative. So, Mr. Speaker, with that being said, the source of money. We know that we can't place any additional taxes. We've waived quite a number of taxes, but we have to spend. So how do we do that? And as the member for East Grand Bahama would have highlighted, sometimes you have to do things which in normal circumstances you might not have to do. But this is the reality we're in. So we have to pursue and borrow money from, I know the member for East Grand Bahama and his team are very good at navigating and discovering the way to get these loans at concessionary rates or at advantageous rates. But the fact is that still we have to borrow it from somewhere, Mr. Speaker. And if I was standing here halfway through the term of this administration, give or take, and over the past 2.5 years, we had very little or no economic growth, or the shrinking of the economy, or had faced extensive blacklisting, I might be hesitant to stand up and support this borrowing, Mr. Speaker. But the fact of the matter is, we had sustained economic growth. It may not have been leaps and bounds, but it was consistent, it was definable, it was there. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I believe, if I understood my material right, we are still having a growing economy. Of course, Dorian has slowed that percentage down a little bit, but it is still growing. So the economy has been growing year after year, consistently. So if I were to stand up here and be asked to support an administration, especially in the financial aspect, where there was no proof of economic growth, there was loss of credibility, in the international market, it would be difficult to support that. But the fact of the matter is, we've rounded a curve. We were growing the economy. Our international standing has been steadily increasing. People are seeing the Bahamas as a more reliable place to do business with and to trade with and to see what our people have to offer. That is not to say everything is perfect. We strive for perfection. We do not achieve it. But that does not mean we should not still strive. So, Mr. Speaker, with that in mind, I believe we've done all we can to highlight that we have the economy in good hands and that this step is necessary and we need to accomplish it and we need to support our brothers and sisters. We need to deliver for them and we need to take care of our people. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I just want to say thank you again to, when I say everyone, I literally mean everyone, Mr. Speaker, from my colleagues here in this place to the media who's helping to show coverage of the Abaco experience, to my constituents, whether they're having to live in Canada, in Nassau, or still right there at home. They're still Abaconian and we still love them. Thank you to all the NGOs and the charity groups and all those volunteers who are doing so much and are still consistently doing so much for us. Thank you to all of them, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of all Abaconians. So, Mr. Speaker, may God continue to bless you, all of my colleagues in this place, all Abaconians and Bahamians everywhere, and may God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, while we permit our guests in the gallery to leave, I just want to endorse the points raised by the member for Golden Isles and the points raised by the member for Central and South Abaco with respect to the issue we seem to have with the social media reports and postings that seem to be very, very callous, very insensitive, and in some cases unlawful. Because I've seen some posts on social media, and it caused me to examine the Bahamas Penal Code to see if there was some reform to the code with respect to obscenity. Persons are able to actually make video posts with their faces exposed and using the most obscene language. And I haven't been, in following the news, I haven't been hearing about any arrests. The member for Golden Isles raised the point with respect to those young students making some most unfortunate remarks. And I believe that it's unfortunate that the Minister for National Security is not here at this time, but something has got to be done. This is eroding the very moral fabric of our society. Something must be done to stop the obscenities in particular that is being disseminated via social media. And with respect to the comments made by Central and South Abaco, it's really regrettable that people seek to terrorize, as he put it, members of or residents from Abaco and Grand Bahama who have been so traumatized by the passage of Dorian. That is so unfortunate. You know, we have to take a stance sometime to correct this, I would say, degradation of our moral fabric in this nation. Otherwise, we are wasting our time if we don't do anything about it. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at the outset, let me emphatically state that there truly is no God but the Lord. And Mr. Speaker, in the book of Isaiah, prophet encourages the readers that when the enemy comes in like a flood, the only wise God, the Spirit of the Lord, shall lift up a standard. I shall leave that there for the time being, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the truth and profundity of this scripture has been tried and proven in my life, in the lives of scores of persons down through the centuries, and indeed in the ministry of which I am privileged to serve. And I say again, to God be the glory. Great things he has done and will continue to do for and on behalf of this government and the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I also want to take this opportunity to thank the gracious, bold, and beautiful people of Bamboo Town who have afforded me this opportunity to represent their views and values here in this place. And Lord willing, I will continue to do so. Even in the midst of statements by the Leader of the Opposition, that I may not be in that number on that great getting up morning come the morning of the general elections. But I want to remind him that when the Free National Movement Saints come marching into this parliament after the next general elections, Bamboo Town shall be in that number, in that new Free National Movement government. Mr. Speaker, as the minister responsible for the Ministry of Transport and Local Government, I offer continued thanks to the Prime Minister, at whose leisure I continue to serve. I thank my hard-working foot soldiers, the persons of the Ministry of Transport and Local Government who, for want of better words, make it happen on a daily basis in that ministry. My administrative and technical officers and their support staff are the driving force behind the continued accomplishments and progress made in the agencies within the Ministry of Transport and Local Government. Mr. Speaker, I will now take this opportunity to give a brief review of some of the areas in my ministry and my remit, since a more fuller airing will be done during the budget debate in June of this year. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the Port Department, which I'm pleased to inform has achieved several notable success this year and last year. First, in support of enhancing the ease of doing business, the Port Department is working along with the Department of Information Technology to create a software solution to managing its services throughout the country, inclusive of a maritime radar to track all boats in our archipelagic boundary, as we seek to increase revenues from our cruising permits. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, amendments have been made to the Commercial Recreation Watercraft Act and Regulations and to the Water Skiing and Motorboat Control Act and Regulations, speaking to the standards for licenses, inspections, and home-built vessels. Ultimately, Mr. Speaker, these pieces of legislation will help to support the avoidance of maritime disasters. Mr. Speaker, I will add that further amendments are being made to the commercial recreational watercraft regulations to include non-traditional watercrafts which were not included in the previous regulations tabled in this House last year.
Our primary concern, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure the safety of marine users throughout the enforcement of proper regulations, hence the adding of non-traditional watercrafts to the regulations. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, we have increased the staff capacity at the Port Department in an effort to foster greater efficiency and quality customer service delivery for and on behalf to the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, as tourism is still the premier revenue-producing industry in the Bahamas, my ministry deems the safety of our guests of paramount importance. As a result, the Port Department is collaborating with the stakeholders in the industry to maintain guest safety and healthy working environments for all jet ski and boat operators in the industry. Mr. Speaker, the stakeholders include the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and Police Force, the Ministry of Tourism, the security management teams of all major hotels, and the Bahamas' Public Parks and Beaches Authority. Consequently, the Port Department has acquired 2 new ATVs, all-terrain vehicles, to be used by beach enforcement officers to better regulate the conduct for commercial jet ski and boat operators, both on the beaches of Paradise Island and Cable Beach. So we will have 1 ATV on Paradise Island, and another ATV will be put on Goodman's Bay, Cable Beach. Mr. Speaker, relative to the Marsh Harbor Port operations, Mr. Speaker, the vehicles that were assigned to the port in Marsh Harbor have all been damaged due to Hurricane Dorian. And as a result, Mr. Speaker, since then, we have acquired at least 1 vehicle to help facilitate the services of the Port Department in Abaco. We know that this has been a source of concern, but we want the general public to know that we will be receiving additional vehicles so that the Port Department in Abaco will be able to carry out its fiduciary responsibilities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am also now advised that communications between the Port Department and the Bahamas Maritime Authority are ongoing relative to a memorandum of understanding to ensure international best practices in regards to vessel safeties, both in Abaco and Grand Bahama, and indeed throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. That's coming too, North Eleuthera. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the Bahamas Maritime Authority. On the 1st of July 2020, the BMA will mark the 25th anniversary of its establishment. Various events, Mr. Speaker, are being planned to mark this occasion, including Bahamas Maritime Week, the 22nd through the 27th of March of this year. I want all under the sound of my voice to mark this occasion, Mr. Speaker, as we intend for this maritime event to be a grand affair for the Bahamian people and for the BMA. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas Registry, of which the BMA manages, remains the world's largest flag for passenger ships, with over 140 ships flying the Bahamas' flag. The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, currently ranks 10th for all gas carriers, global flags, for LNG carriers throughout the globe. The Bahamas' fleet, which stands over 1,500 ships with over 65 million gross tonnage, stands as the world's largest registry per tonnage, and the Bahamas' annual IMO member state assessed contribution as a result represents 4%, Mr. Speaker, 4% of the United Nations overall IMO's budget. That is what the Bahamas Maritime Authority and the government of the Bahamas contributes to the UN. Mr. Speaker, additionally, there have been notable achievements during the budget year to date. Firstly, I am pleased to once again announce that the Bahamas secured IMO Council membership in Category C for the year 2019 through 2021. Secondly, I can inform that the Bahamas was successful in achieving cooperative non-contracting status of the Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission, which is the largest regional fisheries management organization on the planet, and it's for the Northeast Atlantic and is one of the most abundant fishing areas in the world. I want to thank my colleague, the Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resource, Michael Pintard, for his help in helping us to secure this designation along with the BMA. Mr. Speaker, as a result, this will allow us to be able to add to our already growing vessels, our already growing flagship, Mr. Speaker, a whole lot of fishing vessels that intended and were seeking to be a part of the Bahamas' ship registry. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, the Bahamas flag achieved the United States Coast Guard Cord 21 standard, which is a highly valued performance standard for ships trading to the United States of America. Also, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas has the second highest ranked flag state in the Paris MOU. The Paris MOU's whitelist represents quality flags with a consistent low detention record for ships calling at European ports. The Bahamas' record within this region aligns with the lowest ever number of annual detention of ships following port state inspection conducted globally in 2018 and 2019. Mr. Speaker, no other country achieved that status. The BMA ought to be commended. Mr. Speaker, regarding our shipping legislation, the Bahamas Merchant Shipping Act is under review and I will be getting back to the Parliament very soon for the passage of this new Merchant Shipping Act. Mr. Speaker, the BMA is currently developing its digital platform, aiming for a more efficient customer service delivery and product offerings to our international partners. And once deployed, the new IT system, Mr. Speaker, will also help to increase our ship registry, both of our gas carriers, our fishing vessels, and as well as our cruise ships. Mr. Speaker, as global community partners, the Bahamas, the BMA, sits on the Executive Board of Governors for the World Maritime University. The Bahamas is also an active lead member of the Caribbean Port State Control Committee, which is the regional body responsible for standards of ships trading in the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, the BMA, with exclusive representation in Japan and Greece, continues its marketing activities in the world's two largest shipping markets. And Mr. Speaker, it is envisaged that within this year, the BMA will open another office in another Asian city with a very large shipping market as well. But we will not announce the city just yet, Mr. Speaker, because we have found that the success of the Bahamas government in regards to the BMA and our flagship is seeking to be duplicated by a number of countries. So whenever it is that we open an office in an area, a lot of our competitors seem to follow. And so at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we do not want to preface where we're going so that they get there before us. But certainly, Mr. Speaker, once we would have laid the foundation for that new office in that new Asian city, I certainly will inform this honorable House and the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I now move on to the Met Department. The catastrophic devastation that Hurricane Dorian left in the path of Abaco and Grand Bahama, I want it to be known, Mr. Speaker, caused irreparable damage to our weather equipment at the Leonard M. Thompson International Airport, Marsh Harbor, Abaco, and at the Grand Bahama International Airport. Nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, the Met Department moved hastily to install Davis weather instruments to provide meteorological information to pilots and air traffic control personnel at the airport, both in Marsh Harbor and in Grand Bahama. Both stations were operational, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce, within 18 days of the passage of Hurricane Dorian. Mr. Speaker, the level of international donorship to the Hurricane Dorian recovery and relief efforts in regards to med equipment was unprecedented. The Department of Meteorology received from Vaisala Oji, a Finnish company, Doppler weather radars, and airport weather observation systems, or AWOS, worth more than $550,000 US. That's $500,000 worth of donations. These systems, Mr. Speaker, were used to replace the damaged weather systems in Marsh Harbor, Abaco, and in Grand Bahama. And we want to thank Vaisala Oji for its donation to the Bahamas government. Mr. Speaker, in continuance with building capacity throughout the Bahamas, Doppler weather radar, and airport weather observations project. The Vicilla engineers, in collaboration with engineers from the Department of Meteorology, have also installed airport weather observation system, AWOSs, at the airport in San Salvador. This is the 5th of 9 AWOS installations that are going to be completed in the country before June. Mr. Speaker, as I end my report on the Met Department, I wish to emphatically state that this department is serious. I know you would know that, Mr. Speaker, having come from the Met Department, is serious in its mission to keep abreast with international standards of operations and modern technological advances in the field. Hence, meteorological officers are sent on training courses that prepare them to face the challenges of modern weather and climate forecasts. These forms of training are aimed at establishing a tropical desk that will work along with the World Meteorological Organization of the UN and the National Meteorological and Hydraulic Services of the World Meteorological Regions to promote and enhance the scientific capacity of the participating national services here in country. Mr. Speaker, the Met Department truly is moving in a very progressive way technologically, and hopefully we will be able later on this year, Mr. Speaker, to bring the Med Bill to this Parliament, because the Med Department as it is now is not completely established in law. And we're looking forward, Mr. Speaker, once all of these systems would have been deployed, that the Bahamas government will create a new revenue stream, whereas we're going to be able to charge airlines, aircrafts that fly in Bahamian space for the requisite particular weather data. It's done everywhere else in the world, but we here in the Bahamas, since independence, have not seen the wherewithal to be able to move forward in direction. So we're going to move forward in that direction. And we know, Mr. Speaker, that that's going to bring in a substantial amount of revenue for and on behalf of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to another area of my remit, which is the newly formed Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority. On the 9th of December 2020, the Aircraft Accident Investigation Department officially became the Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority, an independent investigator of all civil aviation incidents and accidents by an act of this Parliament. These investigations by this agency, Mr. Speaker, will determine what happened during an aircraft accident or incident, and the authority will develop factual records and safety recommendations to guide current and future work. We know that this has been an area of concern for the Bahamian people given the recent incidents of accidents that has taken place within the Bahamas aviation industry. Mr. Speaker, since the passage of the Aircraft Accident Investigation Authority Act 2019 with attendant regulations, the AAIA has met with key agencies to discuss the establishment of a memorandum of understanding to define responsibility in the area of serious accidents and incidents. Mr. Speaker, though we have passed the act, the board has not yet been established, but it is the intent of this administration, Mr. Speaker, that by the end of February, we will have a new board in place for the AAIA. Mr. Speaker, the agency, the new authority, is in need of additional staff. And Mr. Speaker, by the end of June of this year, we will have all of the requisite staff and technical persons necessary to be able to adequately staff the agency so that the agency, the authority, will be able to carry out all of the mandates of its work. Mr. Speaker, as I'm going down the list of the areas in my remit, Mr. Speaker, I now turn to local government, which interestingly is in the papers today. Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the Local Government Act, Family Island administrators and local elected officials have a mammoth task to perform. Their ability to function at optimal capacity hinges greatly on the support that the various lead agencies here in New Providence render to the local government administrators. The Department of Local Government led the charge through its Family Island administrators, who ensured that all necessary precautions were taken to protect life and property ahead of Hurricane Dorian. They were on the front line, supported by local government officials and representatives of other government agencies. In the aftermath of the hurricane, among other things, a distribution center, Mr. Speaker, was established and operated in central Abaco, and it is still operating in central Abaco. The department continues to work diligently to assist with the recovery effort and to ensure that normalcy is restored to Grand Bahama and to Abaco. Mr. Speaker, to date, the department has extended some $36,000 directly related to this effort, and it is estimated that an additional $10,000, Mr. Speaker, will be expended to continue with these efforts in Grand Bahama and Abaco in assisting the employees of the local government boards, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that currently there are 20 persons in training, Family Island administrators, to ensure that every local government district has access to a Family Island administrator by June of this year. Mr. Speaker, these persons are inclusive of private sector and qualified individuals who have served within the department for many years and have proven themselves as knowledgeable and capable leaders in our community. It is anticipated that these trainees will be placed in positions of understudy by mid-March of this year, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that they are acquainted with best practices in the field before final posting. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of local government facilities throughout the islands, especially Megona, Eleuthera, Exuma, North Andros, and Inagua, in which the department intends to spend some $250,000 to repair and to renovate to standards conducive to habitation and work for our Family Island administrators and staff. I know North Andros would be happy for that. The need exists, Mr. Speaker, for the department to construct new living facilities in Bimini and Harbor Island, and in the aftermath of Dorian, Marsh Harbor, and High Rock, Grand Bahama. He's been talking to me about that. In addition, Mr. Speaker, a new office facility is required for Harbor Island, and we will be addressing that issue very soon. Hopefully, we'll be able to have a place where the local government administrators will be able to operate from in Harbor Island. So, Brother Markey, we will take care of your issues. And road traffic. Mr. Speaker, I now move to the post office. Mr. Speaker, now that the General Post Office staff are able to perform in capable working conditions, they seek to build their operational capacity. In this vein, Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce that the first phase of the international audit to determine operational readiness of our post office for e-commerce was conducted by the United Nations United Postal Union and is now completed, and the Bahamas in 25 years has for the first time received a favorable outcome.
Wow.
Mr. Speaker, it should be noted that the General Post Office is an international port of entry.
Yes, sir.
I want to say it again, Mr. Speaker. It should be noted that the General Post Office is an international port of entry. And I am also pleased to announce that by June of this year, for the first time as a result of the audit, we will receive from the UPU, the United Nations Postal Union, our security certification for our General Post Office. It will be considered, Mr. Speaker, a secure port of entry.
Oh, man.
Mr. Speaker, additionally, the Post Office has commenced an aggressive approach to automation of service operations initiative that will facilitate further modernization of all of the processes in that post office as a result of having moved to the town center mall. The initial steps, Mr. Speaker, were completed by a signed memorandum of cooperation between relevant government agencies such as the Ministry of Finance, the Customs Department, and the Department of Digitization and Transformation. Mr. Speaker, building capacity is key for ensuring that the Bahamas Postal Service operations are in line with international standards. Moreover, our Postal Service officers will be attending, Mr. Speaker, so that they will stay abreast of the current trends within the industry. The Caribbean Postal Union Conference in Aruba in June of this year, and the Universal Postal Congress meeting in August of this year. Mr. Speaker, I will turn to one last area in my remit, which is the Road Traffic Department. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that the Road Traffic Department's cashless initiative has begun. This will ensure a more transparent and accountable process. This effort, we believe, will further increase our revenues from the department. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to announce, along with this initiative, Mr. Speaker is laughing, I'm also pleased to announce that the Southern Islands have ceased the use of paper licenses. It is the objective of the department, Mr. Speaker, to secure 2 additional laptops and webcam that can upload directly to the transportation management system to deliver services once a receipt is provided. Training has begun on this system in both Grand Bahama, Abaco, Exuma, and Eleuthera, and further provisions have been made to do the same on Andros, Bimini, Cat Island, and Long Island. In addition, Mr. Speaker, we are also seeking a new office complex for our operations in New Bight, Cat Island, and I'm sure the leader of the opposition will be happy to know by June that we will have the office in New Bight, Cat Island up and running for services for the people of Cat Island. But I must say, Mr. Speaker, in full disclosure, I acknowledge that we have had lots of challenges with this new transportation management system. Mr. Speaker, the TMS is a work in progress. Mr. Speaker, the TMS system is challenged with managing speed during times of high volumes of customer transactions. However, Mr. Speaker, the program designers and contractors DataTalk, who currently do not have a local office here in country, has been engaged to assist in mitigating the issues experienced during operational hours. Mr. Speaker, I want it to be known that the Ministry of Transport and Local Government is being very aggressive with DataTalk in seeking to have these issues addressed. And Mr. Speaker, we are looking forward to further improvements in short order. Mr. Speaker, the efficiency of services within the Road Traffic Department, Mr. Speaker, hinges on DataTalk getting it right. And hopefully, Mr. Speaker, by June of this year, we will be able to report that all of the glitches in the current TMS system has been worked out. Mr. Speaker, with that, by God's good grace and exceeding wisdom, we continue to do well in the Ministry of Transport and Local Government. Mr. Speaker, I want to state for the record that Bamboo Town supports this supplementary midterm budget and borrowing resolution. May God continue to bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many? Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Southern Shores.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to move that the business of this House suspend until 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Is there a seconder?
Second.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House to suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
All right.